Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Boston Sports Nuts. I'm Paul Izzo along with Jim Russo.
Great to be here, Paul.
Ken Berman.
Let's go.
And happy 2025. I'm going to say it as long as I want, despite Larry David's admonition that you shouldn't keep saying it.
You be you.
This is our annual halfway review of the Boston Celtics in the middle of a season which has had a few ups and downs, I would say, but mostly ups. They are the defending champions. We're going to take a deep dive into the Celtics. As of right now, while we're taping this, they are in second place in the Eastern Conference behind the, I would say, surprising Cleveland Cavaliers team, which only has 4 or 5 losses at this point.
Four.
And, they're a very, very solid team. They've given the Celtics fits, not just this year, but played them tough last year. And we're going to go through the season a little bit. We're going to kick it off with my good friend here, Ken. Ken, where are the Celtics right now at the midway point in the season?
Let's put it this way. The Celtics actually have a .730 winning percentage. Okay. 27-10, .730 winning percentage, and they're 5 games out of the top spot.
6 in the loss column.
6 in the loss column.
And the all-important.
The AILC for those.
The all-important loss column,
right.
As we've said for 30 years on Sports Nuts.
Okay.
So if you think about it, it's a pretty good season so far, I think. Yes, we've had some downs. They had a tough December, 8-6. They've already lost 6 games at home. They lost 4 all of last year. They've already lost 6. Now, the other interesting thing to me about the season, the other night, I think they played the very first game with a full lineup.
Their starting lineup has played 2 games together.
2 games together. So they really have not been a whole team yet, which to me is part of the problem. Because they couldn't even practice during training camp with a full team because Porzingis was not playing at that point. He has admittedly said that he's not in the top shape yet because just hasn't played enough basketball and didn't have training camp. But it looks like he's rounding back into shape a little bit. So at 27-10, .730 winning percentage, what's that? If you do that out, they're going to have about 60
low
wins.
60s.
Yeah. That's a great season if you think about it.
In this NBA?
In this NBA.
Yeah,
so I know we'll talk about it, but there are some ups and downs. But I don't know, 27-10, pretty good.
Yeah, I think part of the problem in looking at the Celtics, not a problem, but is the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're on pace to win like 70.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest, we're taping on a Wednesday. The biggest game of the NBA season is tonight, is the 4-loss Cavs at 7 o'clock. Are going to host the 5-loss Oklahoma City Thunder.
Both with 30-plus wins.
It's phenomenal. These are 2 amazing. The fact the Celtics are 6 back in the loss column playing over 700 basketball, it's insane.
Yeah.
However, a couple of things with the Celtics, I think the issue for the Celtics is this. If they can get through this season healthy, and, they do have a lot of wins, is this. The league, as it's cliche, but it's true. Every team is up to play them because they won, and the Celtics too.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to look at how teams are trying to beat that juggernaut from last year. And I think we're seeing a couple of trends that, frankly, have bothered the Celtics. One is teams are gearing up their defenses to stop the 3, which I believe is resulting in the Celtics taking more contested threes and therefore shooting a lower percentage. I think in the Denver game, they made an adjustment, which we talked about on a previous show. That's number one. Number 2, I think the word around the league is play the Celtics physical.
Yeah.
You muscle up Tatum, Brown outside. You absolutely muscle Porzingis when he tries to post. Even when he tries to go to the free throw line extended, which he's a good shooter from there. The Celtics are going to have to get used to that. And as I've said, and maybe I'm wrong because this is only my eyes. I watch a lot of games. I think since the turn of the year in 2024 through the playoffs through now, the NBA has gotten more physical and the refs have allowed it. So the Celtics are going to have to face this all this season and in the playoffs. So the other thing is Peyton Pritchard got off to a phenomenal start. A phenomenal start. Teams are making the adjustment with him. He was 1 for 6 last night.
Yep.
He has in the last 2 games of what we all determined was a successful road trip, he scored 0 and 3 points. They need a little more from their bench. So the Celtics, to me, are just like, okay, this is what the league's doing to us since we won, and we were 80 wins last year, 64 and 16 regular season. This is what they're doing to us. What are we going to combat in the second half of the season so in the playoffs, these things are not big problems for us? That's my take.
Big picture for the Celtics, I want to make 2 points. Number one, they're a team that relies on three-point shooting. Their percentage is down 3%. Last year, they were around 39. This year, they are around 36%.
Yep, 36.6.
For a team that takes 40-plus,
51 on an average.
okay, 50 points, 50 shots a game, 3% is a lot. That's 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 points, depending on the night, and a lot of games are close. That can be the difference. The other thing, and I think in the Denver game that they played last week on the road, I saw something that jumped out at me, not necessarily a box score thing, and that's this. When Drew Holiday plays well and Porzingis is healthy, you can't beat the Celtics. You might beat them one night or two, but if Brown and Tatum are on the court and Holiday is playing well and Porzingis is healthy, the Celtics should win most games. Mm-hmm. The problem they've had this year is they went through a long stretch where Holiday did not play well, couldn't make his corner threes, couldn't defend, and Porzingis missed 25 games.
Right.
He's barely played.
Yep.
It seems like he plays a lot, but he actually hasn't played a lot. He's missed more than half the games. So when those two guys are either playing well or playing, it makes a huge difference. Yes, Jim makes some excellent points about the way the games are played, but player availability and health has had a big part of the season so far.
Absolutely.
I think they've only had 3 games where the entire roster has been available.
Two games. Yeah, 2 games. That's what I mean. They just haven't been able to get it in gear.
Now that that's not to make excuses. That's just a reason. That's a fact.
Yeah. Last year they averaged about 42.5 threes per game and shot like 39%. This year they're averaging 50-ish and shooting 36%. I think we've all seen that a lot of times, as Jim said, either contested threes or, as I call them, settling threes.
Yeah.
You know what? The guy's not that close to me, so I can pull up from 3, and that way I don't have to physically work my way to the hoop or get into the lane and bang around with somebody. So they've settled for a lot of the threes.
True.
And that's why they're up to 50, which I think is too many. But, as Jim said, if they were wide open and nobody was on them from the corner for 50, I'll take 50 all night long.
Right. I think you're absolutely right, Ken. I think the difference in percentage – actually, I think you're both right. The difference in percentage is, 1, Holiday's not making the open corner 3.
Yeah.
And 2, they are settling, which, they now have every guy in their starting lineup, and Al Horford seems to feel that they can just pull up and take a 3.
Yeah.
That's a hard shot.
Yeah.
The pull-up 3. It still is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a hard shot. And I think a lot of times they just don't want to get in there and grind and work for the open 3 or get to the basket. And, I think that has to change with what I said, which is how teams are playing them. Scal said the other night against Denver, last night, but, is if they're not going to double Brown, just drive. Yeah. He's right. Mm-hmm. That's the key, is adjusting to what teams are doing. And the other thing I would say is, again, my eyes, they're getting beat off the dribble on defense a lot. And, whether that's they're a little bit tired after the long season, or maybe a couple of players showing their age, or maybe the NBA is just really good, which we all know. I think the defense has to tighten up a little if they're going to win the championship.
Now that you mentioned defense,
Yep.
let's think of it this way. So they were giving up the most points in the paint or close to the basket on easy drives for a lot of this season. That was really one problem. But as Paul pointed out, they've played 37 games. Porzingis has played in, I think, 12 of them. Now, if anybody's noticed, the couple of games he's back, he's altering a lot of shots again around the hoop. And they've gone two big guys,
Yep.
which has really sort of clogged up that easy drive to the hoop uncontested. So I think that defense had a lot to do with Porzingis being out because he's a good guardian at 7'3". He's a good last line of defense.
Yeah.
You got a guy 7'3" behind you. He gets by you. Okay. He might make a great play out of it. But by the way, the game against Denver, Porzingis had an incredible block
On DeAndre
on
Jordan.
DeAndre Jordan.
Was looking for a flashback dunk.
Wow, he came down the lane. He's a big, strong guy. He had a run down the lane, all the momentum going to the hoop.
And by the way, all credit to KP because he had been dunked on by Michael Porter earlier in the game, and
Didn't like that.
He didn't bother. That didn't bother him. Maybe it motivated him to stop Jordan.
But that was an incredible dunk. So it just shows that you have all your guys. Your defense might be better too.
Yeah, but I don't think you can deny, though, the on-ball defense is not what it was last year.
Correct.
That's where defense starts.
Right.
Porzingis has helped in the back end. And the other thing you brought up is, and I think we should talk about this, I'd love to get your guys' opinion on this, that I have noticed in the last 5 to 7 games, Joe Mazzulla is really committed to playing double big.
Yeah.
I think more than since before Ime Udoka.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
I think it's an adjustment. I think it's an effort on his part to stop what Ken was talking about. And I also want to, a moment ago with the easy baskets around the hoop. And I also, I want to agree with the invisible fourth member of this group, Sam Izzo.
Yes.
Who thinks there's some experimenting going on midseason. You've seen a lot of different combinations, a lot of different lineups. Players further on down the bench, Springer and Peterson are getting into games sooner. We've seen the unusual lineup of Cornette and Hauser and Pritchard and all kinds of unusual combinations that we didn't see earlier. I think there's some experimenting going on, trying different things for future reference.
Well, let's look at what the double big does, okay? On offense, the double big gives you that dunker position with a big guy, that the NBA refers to now, which Drew Holiday plays a lot, actually, but it gives you that. It gives you another big man if, Ken, you were talking about a guy beats a guy. Porzingis has been invaluable as a rim protector. It gives you another guy to slough off and cover the guy that Porzingis left.
Yeah. Cornette did a great job of that in the road trip.
Right, with another big. On offense, as I said, it gives you the second dunker, but you do lose a three-point shooter. So they don't play 5 out. And I think if he continues to play double big, you're going to see those 3-point attempts go down because they don't have 5 shooters on the court when they do that. So it's very interesting. And, we all love basketball. I think it's fascinating to see how it plays out.
Let's go to something that Paul just mentioned and what we've talked about off the bench, bringing new guys in, experimenting. It's been pointed out by a couple of good articles and by some people on the radio that their bench is not quite athletic enough coming into these games all of a sudden this year. Teams have made the adjustment on Pritchard. They're putting a bigger, stronger, athletic guard on him now. They're not just letting him...
Who's not doubling off him either.
Who's not doubling off him and staying with him. He's not getting as many shots off as he did there for a while. So they've adjusted to that. Hauser's had a bad back pretty much this whole season, so he's had a really up and down season. His three-point shooting has been down because of it. He's just starting to look like get back into form a little bit now.
Made a shot off the dribble in Denver, which was not typical for him.
Right. So,
Shoot guy.
So that's where he's looking around. Like, he's tried Jordan Walsh a lot.
Jordan Walsh plays because he plays defense.
He plays and he's somewhat athletic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They
He
just
plays hard.
Yeah.
From the moment he steps on the court, he's not a good 3-point shooter yet. He's working on it, but he plays defense.
He does. So that's what they're experimenting with because I think Missoula or Stevens, they're smart guys.
Yeah.
They see what's going on. Their bench is, listen, I like their bench. Pritchard, Hauser, Cornette. Horford.
If healthy.
But Horford's shown his age a little bit this year, more so than last year. His percentage from three is way down.
Yeah.
He went 2 for 19 at one point over 3 or 4 games.
Right.
And he doesn't have a low post game anymore. He's pretty much given that up.
Right.
So, they might need some help off the bench.
I think it's become – I think the one thing that Celtics fans, and you guys are among the top, have to remember is –
along with the 2 people you hang around with a lot, too, in your house.
Yeah, they're insane. My wife doesn't miss a game. And she cheers, and she says she cheers when she's alone, which I think is very cute. Yahoo! And all that kind of stuff. She wears her Al Horford jersey when she's by herself. She's adorable.
Yeah,
but
gotta love that, man.
Gotta love that.
Absolutely.
I think the one thing that people have to always remember, and I'm going to be reminding you boys, every year's different. I'm sorry. You could win the championship by going 82-0 and 16-0 and bring back the same group, and they're all healthy, and they won't do the same thing next year.
Yep.
Look at the NBA. The last 7 teams to win the title didn't even make the finals the following year. Did not even make the finals.
I agree with that.
It's very, very difficult. Now you say, is that random? Is it a coincidence? I don't think so. The playoffs in the NBA are very challenging. They last a long time.
Yeah.
It's another. The Celtics were unusual, only playing 19 postseason games.
Right.
Some teams play 24, 25 games.
Oh, yeah.
The last time the Celtics won it, I think they played 26 postseason games in 2008. And the following year, they had a good year. They got an injury there. Garnett got hurt. But, it's hard to play all those games, and then you add the Olympics to it. Some of those guys have played a lot of basketball the last 4 or 5 years. And I've said this on this show a few weeks ago. They're getting everybody's best night after night after night.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, it's not easy to get everybody's best. On your random Tuesday night in December between Charlotte and New Orleans, in front of an 80% capacity crowd, not on national TV, those teams are playing 85%. I'm sorry. They just are. I know NBA fans don't want to hear that. They are. The Celtics have to play 100% every night.
Yeah.
Scal said it in the Denver game. They're getting a playoff atmosphere every single night. And that's part of the reason I think we've seen their performance go down a little bit. If you guys don't have any more points to make, I want to turn it over to our basketball hockey Krishna here, Hari Krishna, Jim, to give us a little deep dive into some of the issues the Celtics have faced.
I will. I just want to say I think you're absolutely right. No year is the same.
Right.
I think that's a great point. And I also would back your point up with, I'll say it again, this is the strongest professional league of over 20 teams I've ever seen. So I think you're dead on there, and there's no guarantee they win even if they're healthy. So
Okay.
Good point. Okay. I just want to take the show in a different direction maybe than other shows. So hopefully...
This is interesting, huh, Paul?
We're really stepping up our game.
This
We're
is
stepping up our
groundbreaking.
game.
I'm not sure how we're going to do this on our podcast, but you're going to have to really walk through it.
Okay, we will. What we have here, I've coached basketball for a long time, not right now, but so I'm into plays and all that stuff. You hear on the broadcast a lot, Scal and Drew Carter talk about the Celtics snap play. And if you watch sometimes, I'll put this up again in a minute. If you watch sometimes, Joe just calls it like that. He just snaps his fingers and then we're going to run the snap play. Now, the snap play, let's say this is Jason Tatum.
The circles are Jason Tatum.
The circles are offense. Jason Tatum. And here comes Luke Cornett or someone to set a pick. Now, that's your common NBA pick and roll, okay? Everybody does it. It's either a pick and roll or a pick and pop, where the shooter, Cornett's not a shooter. This works very well with Porzingis because he can roll or he can pop and make the three from very big, long distances. The Celtics snap play goes a little farther in that someone, usually a guard, if they're going to run this whole thing through, will then come up after the switch. Tatum still has the ball, but they'll come up after the switch and pick the man who has switched on to Tatum, who will then rotate around, and then this guy, say it's Pritchard or Holiday or White, can then pick or pop. That's the snap play that they use. Now, Tatum has several options. If he's wide
Remind
open...
us all who Tatum is on this.
Tatum is right here.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, I can't do it with that. Tatum is right here. So he's coming around. He can shoot it from here with the three if he's wide open, which he's not bad from that spot. Or he can go all the way to the basket. At the least, he can now get into the paint. Okay? Now, the reason I'm showing this play and why we want to get into something a little bit different on this show is that...
This groundbreaking show.
Yeah, groundbreaking. The Celtics use this a lot. And let's talk about what the snap play does, though. It brings a lot of players into a very small area on the court. Tatum running a high pick and roll allows teams to double team him very easily, okay? Because now there's two players right there. They're not sending a double from 10 feet away. He's right there. They're doubling him. As we all know, Jason Tatum has gotten markedly better over the years handling that double.
Yeah.
Credit to him. All credit to him.
Right.
And whoever's worked with him on it. But it still brings up an interesting point, and far be it from me, I wouldn't claim to know, a tenth of what Joe and Brad know. But it brings up the point of one of the adjustments we talked about, segue. One of the adjustments we talked about with all this three-point shooting is Scal has often said it's easier to attack from the side of the court. Would they be better off not ditching the snap play, but adding a play where Jason Tatum is your main focus at the side, and adding a play they ran last year, which was Jason Tatum posting up, which Eddie House called for before me or anybody I know, actually, or listen to, I don't know Eddie House, like 2 or 3 years ago. And they did it last year, and I thought very successfully.
Oh, yeah.
Don't seem to be doing it this way. And I'm just wondering if they should, to counter this physicality that is being used against them, to counter teams' diligent efforts to stop their three, if they added a couple of things that they're not running right now. And I'm bringing it up. I think they should. Again, I think Joe's a great coach and Brad Stevens was a great coach, so far be it. But for the purpose of discussion, and I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
Well, I think one reason maybe they don't like to post up Tatum is I think it's very physical to post up.
The wear and tear for the
No question.
And I think that, the way Tatum plays and hurls his body out of bounds. And the other night, I thought he might be dead in the Oklahoma City game, which we haven't mentioned that play yet, but he literally hurled himself into a set of stairs and was pounding the floor as if, I don't know, he had cracked a rib or something. And thank God he got up. I was really worried about him as a fan.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a lot of physicality involved in posting up. I have to believe they've thought of this. That's the only thing I can think of because they do it occasionally, but not nearly enough.
Yeah.
Last year they did it much more.
Oh, yeah. Tatum, that was a regular play on a regular basis.
And Eddie was loving it.
Yeah. The other thing we've said, Jim, the three of us said for a long time is, maybe he moves without the ball more to get an easy shot as opposed to having the ball in his hand and having to work so hard to get a shot. But
well, that was my second point, which we don't need a diagram for. My second point is this. Scal talked about a trend in the NBA. The NBA is like any other professional league. There becomes trends.
Can I correct you? The award-winning Brian Scalabrine.
You're right about that.
Voted
Yes.
outstanding announcer
Yeah.
by Sports Nuts.
You're right. The award-winning Brian
Correct.
Scalabrine
that's
has
right.
pointed out there's a trend building in the NBA. More and more teams are cutting without the ball. Okay? And the Celtics occasionally do it, but they don't do it a lot. And I've followed the WNBA closer than I ever have this past season. And after a couple of games, I was like, man, what if an NBA team played like this? They'd be brutal to guard. Yeah. They got 5 guys that can score on the court. Some teams are doing it more. I wonder if, 1, the Celtics are trying to do it and the players just aren't doing it, or 2, if to counter some of this intense in your, shirt defense they're experiencing to prevent threes, that they would move more. I mean, Steph Curry is the ultimate example, and I don't expect anyone to move as much as him. But I'm sure you guys did this when you coached. You're a lot tougher to guard when you move. You're easy to guard when you're standing there.
Yeah.
You're a lot tougher to guard. Nobody wants to guard. Anybody want to guard Steph? Never mind he can shoot. I'm talking about how much he runs.
Right.
I don't want to do that. Even if I'm the best player in the world, defensive player. I don't want to follow him for 48 minutes or whatever.
I fouled that kid at the Y a number of times.
Yeah,
okay?
so I'm wondering also if the Celtics, to counter some of this physicality and three-point defense, would incorporate more motion as the year goes on. What do you guys thought of that?
Well, I would love to see that, but I'm not optimistic I'll see it.
I think it's hard for the Celtics to change the way they play. I mean, just on a very basic level, I think they're a team that, for the most part, there are exceptions. There are times in the game where they can go in the paint and do their thing, but they're a 3-point shooting team. They're going to take the threes, and if you follow them, you have to sit there and be miserable at times when they miss 9 in a row, or they go 1 for 18, or they go 3 for 22. Yeah. That's the way they play, and you just have to sit there and go, okay, the regression to the mean or the law of competitive balance tells me that at some point they're going to make 6 in a row and they're going to come back and win this game. That's just the way they play, and I think it's hard for them to play another way.
But the interesting thing, though, is like Curry as an example. I mean, yeah, he moves and gets layups sometimes, but he's really moving to get threes. I mean, he's the guy that really, I don't want to say patented, but he basically did patent the relocation movement.
Right.
And, where you go back to a spot and he would get open and he'd shoot a 3, not a 2. And I'm just wondering if the Celtics can get easier threes if they incorporated a little more movement. It doesn't necessarily have to be a layup like the Princeton backdoor offense, when they almost beat Georgetown at the Providence Civic Center then. I just wonder if that would,
Yeah, well, one thing I've noticed about the Celtics, and I've wanted to bring this up before, Jim might like this, it's a Beatles analogy. When the Beatles came into existence, it was hard for fans, unless you were a diehard fan, to even know which guy was singing. They sounded like a group. But over the years, starting with like Revolver and Rubber Soul, and certainly by the White Album, it became, that's a John song, that's a Paul song, that's a George song. Oh, there's Ringo's song, once an album. They became almost like 4 solo artists using the other Beatles as a backup band. Sometimes I feel like the Celtics, Tatum and Brown rarely seem to be helping each other, playing together. Like Brown will start the game with 15 points and Tatum will have 0. Or Tatum will have an unbelievable first half and Brown will have 1 point. And then in the third quarter, Brown will have 13 points and Tatum will be on the bench. Am I wrong? Or is that like a false observation?
No, I think that's a good observation. I think it's gotten better over the years, which eventually ended in a championship.
Yeah.
But, in the Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, there's no question that was true.
But they don't even seem to interact personally on the court, or you'll see Brown talking to Cornette, or you'll see Tatum whispering to Pritchard, or
I think one of the reasons for that.
It rarely looks like the two of them as a unit, like Pippen and Jordan, or Cowens and Havlicek, or Bird, McHale, and Parrish. It rarely looks like those two guys are. I'll just finish.
Yeah.
Those two guys are figuring out a way that they can both simultaneously take over a game.
I think there's 2 reasons for that. One, and I give the 2 of them all the credit in the world for their evolution. As Scal said years ago, the award-winning Brian Scalabrine,
Thank you.
You're welcome, said years ago, maybe we're just an isolation team. Maybe that's where we are. They've evolved. But what has not happened is neither Brad Stevens nor Ime Udoka, nor Joe Mazzulla, for some reason, has not put in plays that they're both involved in. You could probably count on one hand, maybe two, the amount of times Tatum and Brown have run a pick and roll. And I've called for this.
Yep.
Pick and rolls with two shooters.
Yep.
So you can pick and pop more. The Celtics run, if Tatum is your one, which he is a lot, they love the 1-5 with the big guy. And I think you raise a great point because I've wanted to see this for years. Denver runs, as the award-winning Brian Scalabrine says, when they're on, the most effective play in basketball. Let's face it, because they have the best player in the world. And when Jamal Murray is playing like, as Drew Carter called him last night, Bubble Murray, because he hasn't had his best year, it's the best player in the world. They got the two best players running the play. The Celtics do not do that.
Yeah, it's
they
interesting.
stick one of them in the corner. So I think that's why you see Tatum interacting with a Pritchard or a Cornette, because he's going to run the next play with them. Or Brown talking. He's not going to run the next play with JB. If he was, I think they'd be going, let's run.
But you ever see the two of them like walking down
Let's
the
say it
court
was
together?
A little bit. Not,
I
not as
don't.
much.
But let's say it
a
was
little
called
bit.
fist. I used to, a lot of coaches have a play fist, right? Because
Right,
you
yeah.
can make a fist and make a. Let's say that was their play. I could see them like, hey, let's run fist. I am intentionally talking low. Let's run fist next time, okay? I don't think there's a play for them.
No.
You know, but what's interesting
be wrong.
in their evolution as players, though, both of their assist averages have gone up like almost every year in the last few years.
Yeah.
And Brown's actually passing the ball better this year than he ever has.
And last night he did pass to Tatum for a basket. In
Yeah.
a semi-old-fashioned Ken Berman fast break.
I was wondering, I'm sure somebody could find it. We'll put Sam on the case. How often does one of them assist the other in making a basket?
Minimal.
Yeah.
Very, very
It's
unusual.
not their offense.
It's just
And now, is it as a coaching full year? You know, you got to plan it out. I want, he's gonna get the ball and be featured this quarter, and he's gonna get it this quarter, so that I don't burn them both out.
Yeah. Well, to go to that, the other thing the Celtics offense is really geared to do is matchups. Okay, so one of the reasons they love the 1-5 pick and roll if Tatum is the one is it puts a big man on him. They love that.
Yeah.
I think they think maybe, hey, if we do this with Brown, we're going to get a similar type player on Tatum. It's not even worth doing. Might as well have Tatum go one-on-one.
Yeah.
My counter to that would be if they want to double Tatum, which they do a lot, you can't do that off Brown's guy. No way.
Right.
You're going to leave Jaylen Brown to double Tatum? I don't think you're going to do that. I don't think so. Again,
But like you said, they will double team him if it's Cornette or Cato who set the pick.
Right, because all they're worried about with Cornette is going to the basket.
Right.
They're not worried about the pop. They're not worried about the three.
Right.
They can double easier.
Yeah.
all right. We're running out of time, so
okay.
that's okay. So we got about 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
I just want to go around the table real quick. We're going to do a whole show on this in a few weeks, the state of the NBA. There's been a lot of talk recently about the quality of play, whether it's fun to watch, are there too many threes, do we miss the inside game, whatever happened to the big man, all versions of that debate. As a preview to that, I just kind of want to go around the table, start with you, Ken. What's your take right now on the state of the NBA, and do you think there's a problem?
Well, I think there's a problem because the ratings are showing there's a problem, and they've dropped significantly. I think the NBA, as we've said, and I agree with Jim a lot on this, the talent is as good as it's ever been, if not better. I mean, it's an incredibly talented league. The problem is maybe the amount of three-point shots that are taken, the loss of the big man in some of those great moves, the Jabbar hook shot, the McHale up and under, the turnaround fadeaway by Elvin Hayes. That's pretty basketball that we're not seeing. There's a problem because statistics are showing there's a problem.
Jim?
I think there's a problem. I think they have a baseball similar problem that baseball had. Baseball, the games were taking too long. And, as I think you've all said, baseball is slow to adjust. They finally did. I think this is the NBA's pitch clock problem. and that is the amount of threes being taken because the players are too good. This is not happening because coaches want to shoot threes or this is what they prefer. It's happening because these guys can make them. These are the best shooters of all time. Now, do I have any doubt that if Bill Sharman played in this era, he would practice as much as Curry? No. He'd be one of the top shooters. But he shot 30-something%, I think, and he was a top shooter, right? Back in the old days. These guys can make them. I talked about the walk-up three the other day. The problem is they can make them. I had the same problem on my team once. I got a guy that could make them. I gave in. He could make it. And I think the NBA needs to experiment in the G League. They have a league, the G League, right?
Yep.
Come up with something, form a committee, put the three of us on it. No, not seriously, but form a committee, come up with a recommendation, use it in the G League. And my standard would be have someone like our fourth unseen member, Sam, come up with where you can get the shooting percentages on threes back to like the ABA 25-foot line so that it would influence teams more to go inside a little bit. And I would caution about this big man thing. That wasn't exactly, remember before, you had to be big to play this game. So I'm not for getting rid of the three because Trae Young would really struggle in that old league. You had to be big. And teams with the center, they were drafting Neil Walk over better players. They drafted Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little too far for me. But something has to be done equivalent to the baseball adopting a pitch clock.
My take on it, and I'm looking forward to the more deep dive discussion, but
yes.
very simply is that the three-point shot was a shiny toy. It was like the DH. It was when it originally came into being, the NBA players coming out of college, frankly, didn't know how to make them. There were only a few guys scattered around the league like Larry Bird that could actually make a three on a consistent basis. There was no analytics department. People didn't know things in the 80s. It wasn't that long ago that people didn't realize a walk was as good as a hit. Wade Boggs struggled to get out of the minor leagues. He was walking 100 times a year. They left him down there because he didn't hit for power. The same thing happened in the NBA, and finally people figured out, hey, wait a minute. It's a 40% shot from three. That's more points than a 50% shot from two. Maybe I'll take more three-point shots. Now that they have figured that out, we're seeing too many threes. It's just tipped it too far in favor of the three.
Yep.
Because it's not a shiny new toy anymore, the fans are kind of bored with it.
Right.
And you know what?
Figured that out.
If the fans are bored with it, they're bored with it. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
And the end, if you watch the highlights from the Michael Jordan era, it's not Jordan making threes.
No. It's
Jordan dipsy doodling and going under the basket and changing to his left hand and making a layup. It's Dr. J flying through the air. It's not people making three-point baskets.
But just keep in mind when you make this recommendation, because it has to be made, these players are bigger and faster than ever. Without the three, the court is way too small. You're going to have the 90s again, 80-point games. They have to balance this. And, the analogy, you used analogy with the three, ABA guys, when it started, it's actually started in the ABL in the early 60s, but in the ABA, that was the American Basketball League, they referred to it as the home run. Now, how often does a home run happen as opposed to a single?
Yeah, it's funny you would say that because
now the NBA home run happened more than the NBA single.
Right. Instead of saying shiny toy, I actually was going to say the three-point basket was supposed to be a home run.
That's what the ABA
It's become a single now.
That's what the ABA said.
It's become a single.
It's a home run.
Yeah.
We'll do a deep dive into this because you got to figure out the percentage of where the line needs to be.
Because going back to the 90s, Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni saved basketball.
Yep.
It's come up farther, and now it's time to regress a little.
All right, so we're going to close up going around the table real quick as we enter the second half of the year for the Celtics. Ken, give me your big picture take for the rest of the season. Big picture take.
Wow.
10 seconds.
Big picture take. I think they'll have a good second half of the year.
Jim.
They will improve, but there are no guarantees, and Cleveland and Oklahoma City are for real. It will be no embarrassment to lose to either one of those teams.
So aren't the Knicks in Indiana.
Yeah, no embarrassment.
Leaving aside health, which always throws a monkey wrench into everything, I'm going to say this. If Porzingis plays and Holiday plays, they're going to be just fine. All right, that'll do it for Sports Nuts. I'm Paul Izzo along with Jim Russo, Ken Berman. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching Boston Sports Nuts. You can find all of our episodes available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. For more information, go to westwoodmediacenter.tv or follow Boston Sports Nuts on Facebook, Instagram, and X.